In 2003, we had 6 young children. We found that camping united us. And so we bought a trailer and we would go to the state parks, camp on the weekends. I was having to work overtime and I was away from our family. I didn't like that because I worked in the defense industry and kids couldn't come with me. I couldn't show them what I did at work and I wanted to be with them. So I came up with an idea.
Now, Bruce came home one day and he'd been kind of tired of work. He told me he had this crazy idea.
Well, I described to her what I thought we should do. Buy a bus and travel around the United States.
He would like to go to all 50 states.
Going to museums and factory tours and national parks. And, she had to get used to the idea for a little while. And then when she was on board with it, we started looking for a motorhome.
I thought that's pretty wild. He talked about it more and he had to convince me that this would be a good thing.
The idea was that we could travel in our RV and go learn history, not by reading a book, but go to the place where it happened. And so like going to Mount Rushmore and learning about George Washington, or going to Fort McHenry, and then science. Instead of reading in a book, we wanted hands-on, so we went to museums all across the country, seeing firsthand how things are made and business transacted. Those things you remember much better than reading about them in a book.
We started looking into what all we had to do to prepare for this. Buy an RV, which took us a while to find one because we had 6 children.
And we started out not looking for a motorhome. We started looking for a bus. With 6 kids and 2 parents, 8 people in a motorhome. Most motorhomes in 2003 were built for 2 people, not a family of 8. They didn't have bunk bed models and they didn't have slide outs. We went to Memphis, Tennessee, and we drove entertainer buses. So we drove Conway Twitty's Tweety Bird, and because they had a lot of bunk beds, it fit a lot of people. And we ended up buying a motorhome and then taking out the bed in the back bedroom. And I built 3 bunk beds on one side and 2 on the other, and then a trundle bed that could slide out for the 6th child. And that bedroom in the back was our kids' room, and it worked out real well.
We decided that in order to count our state as a state that we went to, we had to spend the night in the state. We could not just drive through the state. And also we had to mail ourselves a postcard from every state that we went to.
So our friends, they thought it was a great idea and they were ready to go. And they thought we were just talking. They didn't realize we were going to actually do it. And so they were pretty surprised when we loaded up the motorhome and we left. Not all of them gave us good advice. Some of them, thought we were maybe being a bad example with our work ethic and not showing our kids that they needed to have a job and work. But for the most part, I think everyone enjoyed following along with us. I know certainly the people at work that followed us each day because we kept a blog on the internet. I think Alaska was our favorite part. And just because, in Alaska, it was freedom. If you wanted to stop at a roadside park, you could just park there and spend the night. And you could go park on the beach, Homer Spit. The cities in Alaska are not big. The biggest city, Anchorage, is like Waco, Texas. It's just a little town. And Fairbanks is a small town. And so it's a very rural, open country, and it's like a frontier. When you get up to Whitehorse, there's 2 ways you can go. They both end up in Tok, Alaska. And one way is the Alaskan Highway, but a more rugged route is the Top of the World Highway. The Top of the World Highway goes on the mountain peaks, and you actually can look down the mountain on the right side and look down the mountain on the left side because you're riding on the ridge. You go to Dawson Creek, and that's where the gold rush was. And we panned for gold, and then we had to put the motorhome on a ferry and to get across the river because there wasn't a bridge. And the trip itself was just a lot of fun. We'd stop and we'd swim in the river. We'd see bears, and it's a wilderness area. There are not many people that live along the Alaskan Highway. And that was my favorite part of the trip. This is the top of the World Highway. There's a golf course. The greens are on the mountain peaks. And so if you hit your ball and it lands on the green, then you get to play the next hole. But if you miss, it'll go way down the mountain. Then there's a place called the Sign Forest, and they have poles, and people, all the travelers that go through there will stop and they'll put up their sign. And it might be like just a piece of wood, or I remember seeing a toilet seat that people wrote on. I think we had a pizza pan and we wrote on it and we nailed it up on the sign. It was probably a couple acres, and there were just thousands of signs that people had left on their trip to Alaska. We decided we were going to figure out how to go as far north as we could. And from Fairbanks up to Vero, which is where they produce the oil, there's the road deteriorates a lot, and it's a rock road. It's not a gravel road, it's a rock road. And it's very destructive on your car. And we wanted to make it to the Arctic Circle. But it's not like there's a line on the ground that you can say this is Arctic Circle. But when you get that far north, there's no more trees. It's just like shrubbery. It's just cold all the time. They had a gift shop where you could go buy t-shirts and things like that. Then we turned around and went to Denali, which is where Mount McKinley is. But my favorite part of Alaska was the Kenai Peninsula. That's where you have Seward, and Homer is a great place. It's right on the ocean, and you can catch the salmon. The salmon like to go back to where they were born to lay their eggs. And these salmon were born in the fish hatchery. And so they were trying to get back into the fish hatchery. But on the weekend, the workers don't work at the fish hatchery. So the gates were closed. And so all these salmon were waiting outside the gates of the fish hatchery, waiting for them to open up so they could get back in. If you just put a hook on your line and threw it out there, pulled on it, you'd catch a fish nearly every time. We got sick of salmon, but it was fun to catch these big fish. We went and we visited relatives along the way, and we had some relatives that lived in New York City, and we couldn't take our motorhome into New York City. So we parked it in New Jersey, and then we drove our van, and they took us to Twin Towers and the memorial there. And as we went down to Georgia, I had an idea. I had remembered our relatives had lived in Hackworth, Georgia. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to go find the gravestones of my ancestors? I had a genealogy of ores that go way back into the 1700s. And so I want to find them. After a little research, we found a Presbyterian church was where my great-great-grandparents actually went to church. And the cemetery is still well kept. There were all the names I recognized. I was so excited to see where my ancestors had been. And I knew they had a farmhouse around there. And then just as we were leaving, we looked at the name of the street, and it was Orr Street. And I knew that their farmhouse must have been on that road. And so I felt like we created good memories for our kids and that they would remember for the rest of their lives.